somebody like Mac Dre tells you that at the time, did you realize how important or how significant it was, or did it not hit you till Exorcist was released and you saw some of the reaction?
I believed very strongly that if I could lay what I had written, that it was going to be that it was going to go well. I was very confident in myself as an MC, probably overly confident in myself as an MC. I believed that I was the dude, and so I was like, "There's no way I'm not recording these songs." And history has determined that I was right about that. But at the time, it was like almost an obsession, and it was like a hint of healthy desperation involved in it, like a 2 minute drive to win the Super Bowl type thing. I lived for it. I woke up, I did it. I wrote, recorded, I went to sleep, and woke up and did it again. I just exercised and rhyme writing and trying to be the dopest MC that I could be. So I had a very unrealistic, a healthy unrealistic belief in myself and my ability to do what I wanted to do. And then I had crazy friends who thought it was a good idea to try. And so when
Well, I
you
will
put those together, here we go.
Well, I will say the Liquor Brother and Trigger song in particular, I remember when I heard it, I just remember like the passion and the intensity on that song, that verse or what have you in particular. I remember hearing that, I guess back in 95 and just being like, wow, this is like for real going down. Um, do you
Yeah.
remember or what was it like comparing Psychoactive to Exorcist, like the passion or the ferocity that you rapped, was it different? It sounded different, at least especially on that song in particular, but could you tell as you were doing it and as you reflect that it was a whole different thing for you?
Oh yeah, that was completely deliberate. And I think someone could hear it coming on Psychoactive for like songs like Bitch Killer, where that second verse on there, I'm really slinking around that track. I had started playing with unexpected, unique rhyme schemes, and then that sickness verse, that first and that last verse on that sickness, which were the last two verses I wrote while I was free, that to have that approach to bar placement. And again, with Brother Lynch being as dope as he was as a person who delivering rhymes, it was very competitive to be able to deliver in a unique way. And like people forget, I came out, there was no Snoop Dogg when I dropped my first album. You know, there was Tupac went from Kiss Me and I'll Kiss You Back to We Did Niggas in Black to Tupacalypse and then Psychoactive. And so, there was what Ice Cube Death Certificate. We're between Death Certificate and Predator when I pop up with Psychoactive. So I don't think people understand my place in the history, how many people were actually aware of what we were doing and listening to it, and why it was so important for us to be as dope as we were, and how we've stayed here this long and are respected by the MCs that we're respected by. I don't think people realize that we predate a lot of their favorite rappers. And so you got between Psychoactive, prior to Deep Cover even coming out, prior to Death Row Death Row didn't even exist. Not just no Snoop Dogg, there wasn't even no Death Row. And so, boom, there was Psychoactive. And then all that happens, and we got 24 Deep, and then here comes the SIBO Gas Chamber. We have our personality now on hip hop. And I think being from the Valley in Sacramento, which a lot of people confuse with being from the Bay Area, they weren't able to see our impact on what the Bay was doing because the Bay wasn't making the kind of music we were making before we were making it. And then afterward, you had a wave of people making music similar, closer to what we were doing, but they just called us all Bay Area. So Sacramento didn't really get the recognition we deserved for our contribution to the culture because they like how people lump New Jersey into New York or Philly, New York, New Jersey when they don't know no better that these are three different, completely different states. You know what I mean? So being in Sacramento and getting lumped in with the Bay Area, the people don't see that we predate Yuckmouth and the Loonies. We predated Three Times Crazy, when my brother Keith the Sneak. We predated all of them and impacted their music, not the other way around. And so for us, being MCs from Sacramento who were more gang influenced and more, and in the midst of a outright gang war at the time, we're attempting to literally sound like ourselves. And I think me, Sibo, and Lynch, as three people very specifically savage as deliverers of rhymes and being from the same neighborhood, we were very competitive with ourselves for how to say a rhyme. We weren't competitive with ourselves for beating each other in terms of like speaking on each other in songs, but in terms of knowing that the standard of how we spit a rhyme was very high. We didn't get to play games about that. You didn't get to be basic. There are no basic garden block rappers, not one.
Well,
We all,
that's why when we talked about earlier, I was like listening to the three of you when I was first getting exposed to you around those times. I just remember like lyrically, no one could listen to that and say y'all weren't coming with it lyrically, and that's
yeah,
why. But of course they did because they didn't care or they didn't like Sacramento or they didn't know they didn't or they didn't hear it. But I did always wonder too, tied into all of this, do you think it's partially because before Black Market got with Priority, especially, the label was independent. It wasn't in the Bay, even though people think it wasn't. So it's an independent label. It's not with Priority even yet. And then Sibo, obviously none of his stuff came out through Priority, but do you think that super independent and you guys, to your credit too, if you want to look at it that way, you guys were super putting the Crip stuff out there in a way that also was, if not unprecedented, unusual at best. And you're
yeah,
not from LA and you're representing Crip 2 in a way that was not normal.
right.
I think all
Yeah,
those things.
yeah, it's true. And it's dope to be able to talk to you about it as somebody who's chronicled the history and is so aware of it. I remember my first four bars on Psychoactive. That first half of that verse, the first 8 bars of that were completely unusual. People hinted at their neighborhoods. You know what I mean? Like if you knew how to finish DJ Quick's rhyme, then you knew that the last words were, "What's the name of my hood? Ha 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 ha." Figure it out. Like nah, it's Southside Gore and Block. We was blatantly with it. And it was just there was no joke. Nobody other than Banging on Wax and True Blue and them there was no MCs who were not a novelty act, who were blatantly representing where they were from or Crip in the way or any gang in the way that we were. And that was very much, I wouldn't say deliberate. I started making music for the homies. We were rapping at school, banging on lockers. I was writing rhymes to spit for the homies and ended up in the studio. So like the first songs that I made was just for the homies to trip off of. And so I was making gangbanger music for the homies that ended up being on Psychoactive for national consumption, international consumption at at a time where nobody knew specifically like outside of I look at MC8 with the blue tape where you very clearly Easy E was a Crip. But if you were cripping or attached to gang banging at all or blood, you could very clearly see that Easy E was a gang member. He looked like one. I wouldn't say everybody else in NWA, but Easy E for sure looked like the homies where I was from. That's what we look like. And so the MC8 is the same way to me. Like we knew MC8 was from Trag. We knew MC8 was really from the set, but he didn't necessarily push it that way. Him and Chill. But if you got the blue tape, you knew what time it was. Like the blue tape to the West Coast is what that purple tape is to the East Coast. And it was before that by a long time. And so like all shout out to Raekwon and Ghost and Wu Tang, but that blue tape to us was what that purple tape mean to them, and what MC8 and Chill did, Compton's Most Wanted. I was still writing my first rhymes when I was bumping that, and like it was blatantly Crip music, but you had to know it to know it. All the signs were there more so than the blatant statements. And some of the dopest music of the era, by the way. Like, come on, Hood took me under all of that. It was amazing. And so I just wanted to make sure that first of all, we was gonna stand on that. We was gonna represent Garden Block, and we felt that way walking to the store. It wasn't just us. We were speaking for people who felt that way. That wasn't never going in the studio. That was the way we felt on 24th Street, 29th Street, and now 21st Street, the 50s, 47th, the Deuce, everywhere, the Grands. We felt that way walking around, just going to the mall. And so I was able to lock that into place in history, in the music. And Brother Lynch was an instigator. He was like, man, that's what makes you special. You know, that's what makes you X-rated. It's the way you push the set. He was like, don't change nothing. This is what it is. I was like, let's get it. And so we did what we did. And then he came with 24 Deep. And then I start writing Season of the Sickness. That turns into Exorcist. Here comes Season of the Sickness. And by then, by the time Season of the Sickness came out in Exorcist, it wasn't really a whole lot to talk about. So I felt like 40, who, that's family. We love E40. And so 40 was spitting in a way that nobody was spitting. He was such a unique rapper. And then the scenario came out, earlier, and then Busta Rhymes just came and destroyed like everything about what people thought an MC was supposed to do or not do. And so I got to see that. I got to see the dopeness of Tretch in a way as an MC where people may not just not be aware because we don't honor our heroes. We don't. They just not being correctly honored, so people aren't aware that Tretch was such a savage deliverer of rhymes and he was beautiful. You know what I mean? And so you got this brother out there pushing that energy, or the brother from the Poor Righteous Teachers that just was, wise, intelligent, was just spitting. He had bars and control of his delivery in a way that was like separated him from the Rakims. Rakim's comfort as an MC was a part of his strength, or LL's fire as Jack the Ripper, and that was different. But you had people who were doing kung fu within the measures and the bars in a way that was very influential for us. And here comes Spice One. We watching Richie Rich, 415 doing their thing. And so to us, you get a flow like with a mask on, with that kind of pacing, and then it just turns into all those flows with no Bone Thugs out, with no, there was nobody doing none of that by the time me and Lynch start playing around like that. And then Bo had that in his kung fu, but it wasn't his default. Bo was more likely to give you four of one thing, four of another thing, four of gas, and hit you with some speed going into his chorus. There was a very slinky aspect to Garden Block flow at the time, largely driven by me, Lynch, and Bo. And I think that influenced all of hip hop. A lot of people, a whole lot of them, who have never had to say so because, you know, that's what they do. People get a bar of what's going on in the underground, incorporate that into their larger platforms. And then I'll give you credit because to do so would be to admit that they were influenced. Every Rolling Stones has a Muddy Waters. You know what I mean?